Welcome to African Tale Stories channel. Without wasting our time, let's get to the watch. The rain fell on Lagos like 1,000 weeping drums, each drop striking the rooftops in sorrowful rhythm. The sky wore a grey wrapper of mourning, and the wind howled like a mother who had just lost her child. Inside a small upstairs apartment in Surulere, Adaeze Ezenwa sat frozen, clutching a brown envelope with shaking hands. The seal bore the family crest-2 serpents coiled around a golden gourd. She stared at it, heart racing like a trapped bird in her chest. It had arrived just after sunset, delivered by a quiet man in black who didn't say his name. His eyes had been red, not from tears, but from something older, deeper, like the eyes of someone who had just looked into the mouth of a dark secret. Adaeze opened the envelope. Her breath caught. Chief Emeka Ezenwa, your father is dead. Come home. Umuaka awaits you. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Instead, her fingers trembled as the paper slid from her hand and drifted to the floor like a feather. Her mouth was dry. Her soul felt like it had been cracked open and something cold and ancient had slipped inside. Adaeze had always known death could come like this, silent, sudden, and full of shadows, but not his, not her father. Chief Emeka was iron. He ruled the business world like a lion, wore white agbada like a king, and spoke in proverbs that tasted like pepper on the tongue. He was untouchable. Until now, down the narrow hallway, her brother Obinna, tall and soft-spoken with sad eyes and artist's fingers, was humming and sketching in his old sketch pad. Adaeze, he called, noticing her stillness. You look like you've seen a ghost. I have, she whispered. What happened? She turned to him slowly, eyes wide and far away. Papa is gone. He froze. The pencil dropped from his hand. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick. It wrapped around the room like smoke, heavy and impossible to breathe. That night, the dreams came. Adaeze was walking through a thick forest. The trees whispered her name in voices that sounded like drums and cracked bones. She saw her father standing by a river that flowed backward. His white agbada was stained with red earth. His face was turned away. Papa, she called. He turned slowly, but it wasn't his face. It was hers. The blood ran from her eyes, like tears. She woke up screaming. The journey to Umuaka began before dawn. Obinna sat beside her in the rickety bus, his head against the window, earbuds in, sketching dark spirals in his book. Adaeze stared out into the fading night, the trees flying past like ghosts returning to their graves. The further they drove, the more the land changed. The city noise dissolved. Silence replaced it. Then the village appeared. Umuaka. It looked like a place time had forgotten. Mud houses with rusted zinc roofs leaned like tired elders. The wind smelled of roasted yams and secrets. And deep in the heart of the village, the great Ezenwa mansion stood like a shrine tall, wide, and silent. Too silent. As the rusty iron gates creaked open, Adaeze felt a shiver crawl down her spine. The mansion looked sick. The once white walls were stained with brown watermarks. The lion statues that guarded the entrance had cracked eyes and broken teeth. A thick fog clung to the ground like it didn't want to leave. Obinna leaned closer. Does it always feel this strange? Adaeze didn't answer because she remembered. She remembered the last time she'd been here at age 10 when the walls whispered at night and her cousin disappeared by the shrine, never to be found. She remembered Papa's warnings. Stay away from the gourd room, Adaeze. That place carries memories you don't speak of. Now he was gone, and the memories were waiting. Inside, Elder Rufus stood in the corridor like a shadow. His white beard hung like a waterfall of chalk, and his eyes were sharp as broken glass. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Noir, Adaeze, the river has called your father home. She curtsied slightly, more from fear than respect. Why anyone tell me how he died? Rufus's smile deepened. Because, my child, even the living are afraid to speak of such things. Obinna stepped forward. What happened to him? The elder turned to him slowly. He broke the chain. Adaeze frowned. What chain? Rufus looked at her like someone watching a candle about to burn out. The one you were born to continue. That night, Adaeze lay awake in her old room, the mattress stiff and cold. The air smelled like camphor and old cola nuts. She heard footsteps down the hall, but when she opened the door, no one was there. She tried to sleep, but the whispers returned from inside the walls. Daughter of blood, time is folding. If you do not bind, you both shall fade. The gourd remembers. Adaeze sat up in bed, her heart thundering. She looked at the door, and there, standing in the doorway, was her father. Only his feet weren't touching the ground. Umwaka's sun rose slowly, as though even the sky was afraid to look down on the Ezenwa mansion. Birds circled above the compound in strange patterns, cawing in a language older than human tongues. The air smelled of burning incense and wet leaves, heavy with silence. Not the kind of silence that brings peace, but the kind that whispers secrets to anyone who dares to listen. Adaeze stepped into the courtyard, wearing a white wrapper and headscarf, the color of mourning. Her face was pale with worry, her eyes dark from a sleepless night. Every footstep she took seemed to echo across the compound like a warning. Obinna walked beside her, his hands in his pockets, frowning. Why do they keep staring at me? He whispered. She looked around. The servants, dressed in ash-colored uniforms, moved like ghosts, quick, quiet, and without ever meeting his eyes. When Obinna tried to greet an older maid carrying palm fronds, the woman dropped the basket, crossed herself, and muttered, "O Doro, the age has come." Then she ran. "What does that mean?" he asked, voice shaking slightly. Adaeze didn't answer, because she didn't know. But deep in her stomach, something began to churn like a stone dropped into a dark well. In the main hall, large ancestral masks lined the crimson-painted walls. Each one was carved from Iroko wood, with wide mouths and hollow eyes, their teeth painted with chicken blood. A cow horn blew from outside, loud and long, like a call to the dead. And then they entered, the elders, 6 of them, robed in black, with red beads hanging from their necks like chains of fire. In front walked Elder Rufus, her father's elder brother, the man whose eyes were always watching but never blinking. He raised his staff and struck the floor. Boom! A cloud of white chalk danced into the air. He cleared his throat. Ndibe, Ani, people of our house, today we mourn a lion, but we also prepare to bind the blood. Adaeze flinched. What does that mean? Rufus didn't look at her. He stared at Obinna instead. "Your brother is in his 23rd year, is he not?" "Yes," Adaeze replied slowly, her heart now drumming like festival talking drums. The other elders began to hum softly low, deep tones that sounded more like growling than music. Obinna frowned. "Why is my age important?" Rufus's smile was like cold water, because the river always comes for its death at 23. The elders repeated in one voice, "Ike Odika Miri power is like a river. It flows and it feeds." Adaeze felt dizzy. She reached for the nearest chair, but it was too late. A servant pulled it away before she could touch it, muttering under her breath, "No one unbound may sit beside the unchosen." "What is going on here?" Adaeze cried, her voice breaking. Elder Rufus turned to her at last. "It is time you were told the truth." That night, the wind picked up again. The harmattan blew through the compound like a restless spirit, slamming windows and whistling through keyholes. Adaeze wrapped herself in a thick wrapper and sat beside Obinna in his room. He looked pale. He had been coughing all evening, but the cough wasn't normal. Every time he coughed, a black feather dropped from his mouth. "Something's wrong with me," he whispered, shivering. "I don't feel like myself." Adaze's hands were cold as she touched his forehead. No fever, just fear. Suddenly, the door creaked open. The young servant girl stood in the doorway, her eyes wide, her hands trembling as she held a gourd of palm wine. Her name was Ugoma. She bowed low and whispered, "They are watching. The spirit of the gourd is awake. If you love your brother, take him and run before the binding day." Adaeze stood, heart pounding. "What binding? What day?" But before Ugoma could speak again, a loud gong rang from outside. She dropped the gourd, screamed, and ran like a goat chased by fire. Outside, the elders had gathered again, dancing slowly around the burning pot. The flames flickered high, casting long shadows on the walls. One shadow stretched longer than the rest. It looked like her father, and in his shadow's hand was a wedding ring. Adaeze screamed and slammed the window shut. The reflection in the glass was not hers. It was her father's face, and he was crying blood. The next morning rose red, as if the sky had bled in the night. Crows gathered on the roof of the Ezenwa mansion, their black feathers rustling like old secrets. In the compound, the scent of burnt bitter leaf and wet earth floated through the air. Adaeze woke with a startled pillow, damp with sweat, her hands clenched into fists. She had dreamt again. This time, she and Obinna were tied together by a thick red rope. They wrapped around their waists like a snake, tightening with every step they took. Behind them, voices whispered in a tongue she did not understand, but her spirit knew one word too well: sacrifice. The parlor was dim when the family gathered. The curtains were drawn, and a single oil lamp flickered on the center table. On the wall, a framed photo of Chief Emeka stared down at Demi's eyes, sharp, proud, and almost alive. A small wooden chest sat in the middle of the room. Elder Rufus opened it with a brass key that clicked like the snapping of a bomb. Inside was a folded parchment, old and yellowed, sealed with the red wax of the Ezenwa crest, a serpent, a gourd, and a chain. The elder cleared his throat, his voice deep like a hollow drum. "This is the last will and spiritual testament of Chief Emeka Ezenwa, son of Okechukwu, grandson of Obayoma. keeper of the gourd. The room fell silent. Even the wind outside stilled, as if the world itself was listening. Rufus continued, "To my daughter, Adaeze Ezenwa, who has served the family with wisdom and fire, I leave the ancestral diaries and the key to the lower chamber." Adaeze blinked. "Lower chamber?" "To my son, Obinna Ezenwa, child of my final breath, born into the 12th generation, I pass on the chain of wealth. But know this, the riches must not sleep. The bond must be restored." Whispers rippled through the room like snake tongues. Obinna shifted in his seat. "What bond?" Rufus ignored him and read the last line, voice trembling now, whether from age or fear. It was hard to tell. "If the bond is not sealed by his 23rd moon, the river shall take what it once gave. The Ezenwa name shall rot like unburied yam." Gasps filled the room. One elder crossed himself 3 times. Another muttered, "It has begun." Adaeze stood slowly. "This is madness. What bond? What sealing? What kind of will is this?" Rufus finally looked at her. "Your father was not just a businessman. He was the last keeper of the ritual. The riches you all enjoy came with a price. That price has come again." Her hands began to tremble. "What price?" The elder didn't answer, but his eyes slid to Obinna. Later that evening, as shadows crept like vines through the halls, Adaeze made her way to her mother's room, the only part of the house that still smelled of old perfume and stories. She pushed the door open gently. Inside, her mother, Mama Nenena, sat on the floor, her wrapper loose, her hair uncombed. A single candle flickered beside her, casting a golden light on her tear-streaked face. Adaeze knelt beside her. "Mama," she said softly, "I need the truth." Nena looked at her daughter as if from far away. "Mama," Adaeze repeated, holding her cold hand. "What is the bond?" Nena's lips trembled, and then she whispered it. "The riches must be fed." Adaeze's breath caught. "Fed with what?" she asked, voice thin as thread. Her mother's eyes closed, and a tear escaped. "Not what? Who?" Adaeze froze. Her heart felt like it had been dropped into ice. "Mama, what do you mean?" Nena leaned closer, her voice cracking like an old pot. "Long ago, our ancestors made a pact with the river goddess. To be wealthy, one child must be bound to another. Blood to blood, spirit to spirit. The bond was always sealed through a sacred union." Adaeze pulled back, horrified. "You mean siblings?" Her mother broke down, sobbing now. "I couldn't stop it. I tried. That's why I left. That's why I became quiet. But your father, he was the keeper. He said without the ritual, our lineage would fall, our souls would be swallowed. And now that he's gone, they'll come for Obinna." Adaeze stared at her mother, the candlelight dancing in her wide, frightened eyes. "Then we won't let them," she whispered. But just then, a loud crash came from Obinna's room. A shriek. Adaeze leapt to her feet and ran down the hallway. When she burst in, she found her brother convulsing on the floor, black feathers pouring from his mouth like river water. His eyes were rolled back. Strange symbols burned into his skin, ancient, glowing red. A voice echoed from nowhere, deep and cruel. "The bond will be sealed, one way or another." Adaeze screamed. The candle in the hallway went out. Darkness fell, and the house began to breathe. The next morning came with no birdsong. The sky was wrapped in thick clouds, heavy and grey, as if heaven itself held its breath. Adaeze and Obinna were silent as they rode behind Elder Rufus in the long black jeep with no license plate. The road twisted like a python through the forest, swallowing light. Every tree they passed leaned toward the car, their branches gnawed like reaching fingers. Obinna's hands were cold, his eyes distant. The marks on his skin had faded, but something inside him had changed. Adaeze felt it in her spirit that little brother was sleeping somewhere dark, and she didn't know how to hold him back. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Rufus didn't turn. To the beginning, to the place where all Ezen was, are bound. They turned off the main road onto a hidden path, paved with black stones. Trees rose on either side like guardians, whispering secrets in the wind. At the end stood an ancient gate, carved with the image of a god wrapped in chains. A red cloth was tied to each post. The air was thick wet, sacred, watching. Njoku Shrine. Rufus stepped out first and opened the rusted gate. As soon as Adaeze passed through, her chest tightened. It was like entering another world, one where time didn't move forward, one where something ancient waited. Inside, the shrine was round, built from red earth and bone. Skulls hung from the ceiling like lanterns, and feathers lined the floor. At the center stood a giant wooden god, carved from Iroko, its mouth sealed with beeswax and cowrie shells. It pulsed, it breathed, it watched. Rufus placed his staff before the god and bowed low. "Keeper of the wealth," he said, "we bring the unbound child." Obinna took a step back. "What is this place?" The elder straightened slowly. "This is the altar of the pact, where your ancestors first promised blood for riches, where your father drank the milk of the gourd and bound his firstborn." Adaeze gasped. "Firstborn? You mean me?" Rufus nodded. "Your birth sealed the first half of the covenant. His son Obinna must complete it. Only then will the river continue to flow." Obinna frowned. "Complete it how?" The elder raised a hand. The gourd cracked open with a hiss, and thick smoke poured from it, dark, red-tinged, and sweet like rotten fruit. Images appeared in the air. A man and woman, tied by red cloth. A wedding. A sacrifice. A blessing of rain. A baby with black eyes. He must marry his sister. Rufus's voice was flat, final. Silence slammed into the room. Obinna stumbled backward, eyes wide. "What? No, that's sick. That's not." Adaeze shook her head violently, tears burning her eyes. "Never. That's evil. I will never, never." But the god pulsed again, louder this time. The skulls above them began to clatter. The feathers swirled into the air. The shrine groaned like it was alive and hungry. Rufus stepped closer. "It is not marriage as you know it. It is ritual, union of the spirit. The god does not see with human eyes." Adaeze grabbed Obinna's hand. "We're leaving." But Rufus blocked the path. "You don't understand. If you leave now, Obinna dies on his 23rd birthday. His blood will boil, his bones will turn to dust, and the curse will fall on every child born after him. The god will be fed on way or another. Obinna's breathing quickened. I don't want to die. Adaeze held his face. And you won't. We'll find another way. There has to be another way. The elder's eyes darkened. There is no other way. That is the price. Your father paid it, your grandfather paid it, and now it is your turn. Suddenly, Obinna fell to his knees. His back arched. His mouth opened, and black liquid spilled out like tar. The gourd glowed. The smoke rose, and a voice echoed through the shrine. Bind or bleed? Adaeze screamed, dragging her brother from the smoke. She turned to Rufus, her voice shaking like dry leaves. We will not do this. If you want, you have to go through me. And then she did something no one had done in generations. She spat on the floor of the shrine. The ground trembled. The skulls cracked. The god let out a howl. Adaeze dragged Obinna out as the shrine collapsed behind them, smoke chasing them like a river of shadows. As they fled into the forest, she made a silent vow. I will protect him, even if it kills me. Thank you so much for watching this intense and gripping story on African Tale Stories channel. Watch out for the next episode on this channel. Thanks.